I'm Melissa Harris, 39, and I worked my way from late bloomer to Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy. For years, I showed up for my sister, my parents, my family, quietly covering bills, attending events, never asking for recognition. But when my sister mocked my wedding, called it a joke, and turned it into a punchline, I made a decision that shifted everything. Ever been underestimated by someone you bent over backwards for? If that hits home, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your dignity after someone crossed the line, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happened next? You won't see it coming. My name is Melissa Harris, and I've spent most of my life being underestimated, not by strangers, not by rivals, but by the people who should have known me best. If you've ever had someone in your own family dismiss everything you've built, everything you've earned, simply because it didn't look the way they expected it to, then this might feel familiar. I was born 16 months after my sister Alyssa. Just enough of a gap that she always got there first to speak, to walk, to make friends, to claim the spotlight at every family gathering. She was the pretty one, the extrovert, the child who never had to be reminded to smile. I was quiet, bookish, shy, at least around people who expected me to perform. If Alyssa was the high-gloss magazine cover, I was the footnote. Our parents leaned into it early. Not maliciously, not that I recognized at the time, just in the way people start assigning roles in families and forget that children grow. Alyssa's confidence was praised, so it grew stronger. My independence was noted, but rarely nurtured. I learned early that if I wanted something, I needed to find a way to get it myself. By the time we were teenagers, the contrast between us was the stuff of holiday table jokes. Alyssa had a rotating cast of boyfriends and a cheer squad nickname by sophomore year. I joined ROTC, worked part-time at a hardware store, and spent weekends studying for the SATs. I didn't care much for makeup, and I liked the structure of uniforms. I didn't announce my goals, I just moved toward them quietly. When I told our parents I'd been accepted into the Naval Academy, they were proud, but cautious. "Are you sure that's what you want?" my dad asked, frowning like I'd told him I wanted to shave my head or move to a war zone. Alyssa, who was already 2 years into a marketing degree at a state college, laughed out loud. "You? In the Navy? I give it 6 months before you're crying to come home." I didn't respond. I just packed, shipped out, and stayed gone for 9 years. Over those years, I worked harder than I thought possible. Graduated with distinction. Went through officer training, deployed 3 times, and clawed my way into elite command assignments that required more from me physically and mentally than I knew I had. I found my people, my rhythm, my sense of place. And even with the long nights and longer deployments, I felt more myself in that world than I ever had in the one I came from. Still, I kept showing up for family when I could. I flew back for Alyssa's engagement party, smiling through champagne toasts while her friends whispered about my haircut and my intense energy. When her boutique clothing business collapsed 6 months in, I quietly wired money to our parents so she wouldn't have to declare bankruptcy. When our mom had emergency surgery and insurance only covered half, I paid the rest without saying a word. No thank you note. No acknowledgement. Just a short text from Alyssa 3 weeks later. "Glad mom's home. Don't know what we'd do without you." It wasn't gratitude. It was logistics. When she had her first baby, I sent a package from overseas, not just toys, but essentials I knew she couldn't afford. I even offered to cover part of the baby's daycare so she could go back to work if she wanted. "You don't have to play hero," she said, her voice flat when we spoke on the phone. "You always make it sound like I'm drowning." I wasn't. I never said anything like that. I just saw a need and tried to help. That's what I'd been trained to do. Identify the gap. Fill it. But helping Alyssa was never about teamwork. She saw it as interference, or worse, condescension. Any reminder that I was doing well, that I had structure, respect, a paycheck, and pension, it made her brittle. I learned to downplay everything. When someone asked what I did, I'd say logistics officer instead of using my actual title. When someone commented on my uniform at family gatherings, I'd laugh and say I wear it because it's easy, one less decision to make. Still, it didn't matter how low I spoke or how much I gave. Alyssa found ways to cut me down. Navy weddings are basically dress-up parties, she told a friend once, not realizing I was standing right behind her. They all look like they're about to film a recruitment commercial. You'd think with all that discipline they'd learn how to plan something tasteful. That was 2 weeks after I got engaged. She hadn't congratulated me, just asked if we were planning to elope in a submarine or something. When I told her we were doing a ceremony at the base chapel, simple, respectful, with close friends and colleagues, she rolled her eyes. You're really going through with that? God. What are you gonna wear, a metal sash and combat boots? I let it go. That's how I handled her. I let it go. The jokes kept coming. At Thanksgiving, she passed around a fake invitation she printed as a joke, a parody of what she thought my wedding invite would look like, complete with camouflage patterns and a cartoon of me saluting in a veil. Everyone laughed. Our uncle choked on his drink. My mom tried to wave it off like it was harmless. I smiled, because that's what you do when you don't want to start something you know you'll be blamed for finishing. I didn't explain that I was being promoted in 3 months. That the wedding had been planned around the timing of that ceremony for a reason. That the guest list included more stars than most people would see in a lifetime, not celebrities, but generals, admirals, former SEALs whose loyalty I had earned through years of service and shared loss. I didn't tell her that the white dress I'd chosen wasn't regulation, but it had been handmade by a veteran-owned boutique that donated profits to Gold Star families. Or that I would be walking into that chapel with more than medals. I would be walking with history. None of that would have mattered to her. Because in her eyes, I was still the weird little sister playing dress-up in boots too big for her. Still the quiet one. The serious one. The one who never quite knew how to make people like her. And maybe that's true. I never learned to make people like me. I learned how to make them trust me. To follow me. To respect me. That's not the same, but it lasts longer. I didn't want a performance. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to marry the man I loved in a way that felt honest. But somewhere along the way, my sister decided that honesty, the kind that doesn't rely on filters or curated selfies or Pinterest boards, was laughable. So I let her laugh. I let her talk. I gave her the space to underestimate me one more time. Because I knew what was coming. And I knew she wouldn't be able to laugh through it. Not when 200 SEALs stood up at once. Not when the room silenced itself in unison. Not when every eye turned and she realized what those 4 stars on my shoulder really meant. But we'll get there. First, she needed to humiliate me one more time. And I needed to let her. When I called to tell her I was engaged, she didn't ask his name. Didn't ask how we met, how he proposed, what he was like. The first thing she said was, "Wait, you're still doing that military thing?" I paused, caught off guard by the tone. It wasn't surprised, it was bored. Like I'd told her I was still working retail or temping after college. She let the silence hang just long enough to suggest I was the strange one for thinking it mattered. "I thought you'd be done by now," she added. Like, ready to do something normal. Civilian. I should have known then what was coming. That whatever this wedding meant to me, whatever I hoped it might signal to our family, to her, to anyone who'd quietly assumed I was just passing time until I settled into something more palatable, none of it would register. She didn't ask what kind of person my fiancé was. Didn't even ask if he was Navy. It wouldn't have mattered. In her eyes, military meant something abstract. Foreign. Inflexible. Definitely not romantic. I told her we were planning a ceremony on base. That it would be small, mostly people we served with. "Wow," she said. "Sounds intense." Then a beat. "You know what that sounds like? A costume party." I laughed, one of those clipped, defensive laughs you use when you don't want to give someone the satisfaction of knowing they hit a nerve. Like, is everyone going to show up in medals and hats? Are you wearing a sword? Is there, like, a flag march or whatever? She said it like she was genuinely curious, but her voice betrayed her. There was that same edge I'd heard since childhood, whenever I won something she didn't understand or took up space she thought belonged to her. "I bet you're walking down the aisle in combat boots," she said with a little snort. "Or maybe some kind of dress uniform with lace cuffs. Can you even get married in uniform? Is that allowed?" I told her yes, it was. Well, I hope there's an open bar. Military people drink, right? I ended the call soon after that. Said I had a meeting. It wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell her it was with a colonel. Later that week, my cousin forwarded me a group text Alyssa had started. It was a mix of high school friends, extended family, and two of her old roommates. They were joking about bridesmaid dresses, how she hoped I wouldn't make them wear camo. One of them asked if I was marrying a guy with a buzz cut and a 1,000-yard stare. Alyssa replied, pretty much. Probably met him in a mess hall while doing push-ups. I didn't respond. I read the whole thread twice and closed it. The next time we were in the same room was a family brunch at our aunt's house. A long table covered in frittatas and fruit trays. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everyone talking over each other, the way big families do when they want to seem happy. Alyssa showed up late with two friends from her Pilates studio. They were dressed like they'd come from a brunch-themed photo shoot, loose linen, glossy hair, curated laughter. When I greeted her, she air-kissed me like a coworker she barely liked. Then turned to her friends and said, "This is my sister, the Admiral." It wasn't technically true, not yet. I was still 3 months from promotion. But the way she said it, loud, exaggerated, with mock awe, turned heads. "She's getting married on a military base," she told them. Can you imagine? One of them made an impressed face. Oh, wow. Yeah, Alyssa nodded. Probably gonna have drones filming the ceremony and jets flying overhead. She laughed, then added, "I'm just hoping there's cake and it's not MREs." I smiled thinly and sipped my coffee. She kept going. Did I tell you what she said the dress code was? Formal or uniform. Like it's a war movie premiere. She's not really the white dress type anyway. Her friends laughed, unsure whether it was okay. One of them said, "That's kind of badass, though." Alyssa just shook her head. "She's always been the serious one," she said. "Even when we were little. Didn't smile much, didn't play with Barbies. Just lined them up like troops and gave them missions." She turned back to me, her voice going mock sincere. "You should have a military band play 'Here Comes the Bride' on bugles." Or, wait, do they use bugles or just, like, shouting? More laughter. I looked around the table and saw who was laughing with her. And, more importantly, who wasn't. My aunt glanced down at her plate. My mom gave a polite chuckle but didn't meet my eyes. My dad cleared his throat and asked if anyone wanted more coffee. No one stepped in. No one said, "That's enough." And I understood something in that moment. It wasn't just that Alyssa didn't take me seriously. It was that making me the joke made her feel larger. She didn't understand my world. Couldn't enter it. So she mocked it until it felt smaller. More manageable. Something she could joke about over avocado toast and flat whites. She needed me to be absurd. Because if I wasn't, if the medals were real, if the ceremony meant something, if the uniform stood for more than dress up, then she would have to contend with the fact that her little sister had built a life grounded in purpose and earned respect. And that was a harder thing to laugh at. So she laughed early and often. Loudly. Publicly. She made herself the narrator of my story, the sarcastic big sister rolling her eyes at the weird wedding, and the girl who never quite figured out how to be normal. I let her. Because the truth is, you don't win anything by arguing your value. You just waste energy proving something to people who've already decided not to see it. So I watched. I remembered. I measured the distance between her jokes and my reality. And I waited. Because some people don't understand the weight of your presence until they're forced to stand for it. And when that day came, I knew exactly who would be watching her face when the room rose. 2 months before the wedding, Alyssa invited me to what she called a low-key girls' night at her place. She said it was just for fun, wine, takeout, a little wedding planning. Nothing serious, she promised. Just a way to get your mind off logistics. I hesitated. By then, I'd already stopped expecting support from her. She hadn't offered to help with anything, no RSVP tracking, no vendor calls, no dress shopping. But I told myself this could be a peace offering. A small gesture to show that maybe, beneath the jokes and the barbs, she still wanted to be part of it in some way. Besides, our mom had nudged me. "She's trying," she said. "You've always been the more serious one. Maybe she doesn't know how to connect unless she makes it light." I don't know why I listened. Habit, maybe. Or hope. I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, bottle of wine in hand, expecting a handful of women in sweatpants and messy buns. What I walked into looked more like a reality show taping. Candles, curated snacks, wine glasses arranged like props. A slideshow already looping on the TV, images of me at 12, braces and bangs, then 16 in full ROTC uniform, looking half miserable at a school dance. The room was full, 8 or 9 women, some I recognized from Alyssa's social media, a few I'd never met. They clapped when I came in, but it felt rehearsed, like a cue had gone off. There she is. Alyssa called from the kitchen. The bride of the battlefield. I smiled tightly and sat down. Someone handed me a glass of wine. The slideshow kept playing. I tried to laugh. Really tried. The photos were old, mostly harmless, but there was a tone already set, one I couldn't steer. Alyssa came over and sat beside me, grinning. So, she said, we thought we'd help you with some inspo. You know, since you've been a little untraditional with the planning. Someone dimmed the lights. A new slideshow started. At first, I thought it was a joke meant for everyone. But it quickly became clear the punchline was me. Photoshopped wedding dresses, digital mock-ups of gowns made out of camouflage fabric, adorned with grenades and medals, one with a little cartoon tank across the hemline. Another with a veil made out of netting. The final image had a G.I. Joe doll and a Barbie saluting each other next to a wedding cake with Operation Matrimony in block letters. The laughter was immediate and loud. I didn't say anything, just stared at the screen. Wait, Alyssa said, flipping to the next slide. This is the best part. She held up a photo I'd sent her a few weeks prior, a picture of a dress I'd been considering. Clean lines, simple silhouette, elegant but strong. It wasn't flashy. No sequins or sweetheart neckline. It felt right to me, grounded, intentional. She blew the photo up on screen, circled it with a virtual marker, and said, "That's not a real wedding dress." The room went quiet for half a second. Then more laughter. "Are you getting married or re-enlisting?" she asked, smirking. I looked at her. Really looked. Not just at her expression, gleeful, sharp, half-drunk on her own performance, but at the people around her. The ones who laughed without hesitation. The ones who laughed, then glanced at me like they weren't sure if they should have. The ones who stayed quiet, but didn't move. And I realized something I should have accepted long ago. She didn't want to celebrate me. She wanted to contain me. Keep me in the role she'd written for me. The awkward sister with no fashion sense, no social skills, no understanding of what a real wedding looked like. That role made her feel bigger, smarter, relevant. I put my wine down and stood up. "Thanks for the wine," I said. "I'm heading out." Someone, I don't remember who, asked if I was okay. I nodded. Just tired. I didn't look at Alyssa. I didn't owe her a scene. Outside, I sat in my car for a while, letting the silence settle around me. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I'd been angry as a kid, when she'd taken credit for something I'd done or made fun of my hair or told her friends I was basically a boy. This wasn't that kind of betrayal. It was colder. Sharper. Not a wound. A confirmation. That was the night I stopped pretending she'd ever respect me. Not quietly, not privately, and certainly not in front of people. She didn't want a relationship. She wanted an audience. And I had no interest in being cast in her act. When I got home, I deleted the wedding Pinterest board we shared. Not out of spite. I just realized it was pointless. She'd never been interested in my ideas. I also removed her from the planning email chain. There wasn't much left she needed to know. The dress had already been chosen. The base paperwork was filed. The guest list had been submitted for clearance. She wasn't on it. That decision wasn't made out of anger. It was made out of clarity. I wasn't going to let her turn my wedding into another performance space. Not for herself. Not for anyone else. The ceremony wasn't a spectacle. It was a commitment. And the people in that room, every last one of them, would understand what that meant. They'd earned the right to stand when I walked in. She hadn't. Not because of the jokes. Because of the intent behind them. Because when someone hands you a milestone and you use it as a punchline, you don't get to be surprised when the door closes without you. That night, I sat down with my fiancé and told him what happened. He listened quietly, didn't interrupt. When I was finished, he said, "She's not going to stop. She'll escalate when she realizes she's not invited." "I know," I said. "Do you want me to talk to her?" "No. She wouldn't listen to you. She won't listen to you either." "I'm not talking to her." He nodded. "Okay." We sat in silence for a while, then he reached over and took my hand. "She's going to regret it," he said. "Maybe," I said. "But that's not the point." The point was, I'd spent years letting her define me, the quiet one, the background one, the serious one. Now, she defined herself. And that meant I was free. I didn't say much on the drive home. The road was quiet, just a dull stretch of late evening traffic and windshield reflections. My fiancé kept both hands on the wheel, one eye on me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. After about 20 minutes, I finally spoke. Not in a rush, more like opening a slow release valve that had been tightening for years. "It wasn't a girls' night," I said. He didn't answer right away. Just nodded once, waiting. "It was a roast," I added. I walked in and they had a slideshow. Old photos of me. Edited ones too, fake wedding dresses with camo and ammo belts. One of them looked like a Halloween costume. Still, no interruptions. Just the sound of the turn signal blinking while we switched lanes. She took the dress I sent her, the real one, and pulled it up on screen. Said it wasn't a wedding dress. Asked if I was getting married or re-enlisting. He glanced at me. "You okay?" "I'm not surprised," I said. He didn't say she crossed a line. Didn't offer to confront her. Didn't tell me what to feel. Just let me sit in it. Let me be angry without making it about him. "She has no idea what it cost me to get here," I said. "Then don't waste energy explaining it to her." That's all he said. And it was enough. Back at home, I changed into sweats, sat on the floor with a bowl of cereal, and went quiet again. My brain kept replaying little things, the tone of her voice, the way people laughed, the look on one woman's face when she realized I wasn't in on the joke. It wasn't one moment. It was every moment leading up to it. The time I skipped the graduation party because I was deployed and she told people I chose to miss it. The Christmas where I mailed home medals for display, and they ended up packed away in a storage bin because they didn't match the decor. The birthdays she forgot. The favors she expected. The way our parents never quite challenged her because that's just Alyssa being Alyssa. I'd spent years shrinking so she could shine. Dulling my edges, avoiding stories, keeping my rank vague in conversation so no one would feel shown up. At first, I thought that was humility. Then I thought it was strategy, keep the peace, pick your battles. Now I saw it clearly. It was survival. It was learning that in some families, success only counts if it fits the script. And I didn't fit it. I wasn't supposed to outpace her. Wasn't supposed to command rooms. Wasn't supposed to show up in places she couldn't explain. So I made myself smaller. When people asked what I did, I'd say I'm in the Navy instead of explaining what my actual job involved. I stopped bringing guests to family events because they always ended up cornered with stories about how we're so different, you'd never guess we're related. Even with the wedding, I'd softened everything, toned down the ceremony, avoided listing names on the invite that might draw questions. I told myself it was about privacy. Simplicity. But that wasn't true. It was about bracing. Bracing for the eye rolls, the jokes, the way Alyssa could make anything feel ridiculous if it didn't orbit her. And I was tired. I sat there on the floor that night, spoon in hand, and realized I'd spent most of my adult life trying to prove I could serve others, my country, my team, even my family, without needing attention, without needing to be seen. But maybe being seen wasn't the problem. Maybe being dismissed was. She had no idea who I'd become. And at this point, I wasn't sure she wanted to know. I didn't cut her off. There was no dramatic confrontation, no phone call, no boundary lecture. I just stopped making space for disrespect. I unsubscribed from her commentary. Stopped filtering my updates. If someone asked what I did, I told them plainly. If they didn't get it, that wasn't my burden to fix. I sent out the final wedding update that week. Attached the base access form, a list of ceremony protocols, and a respectful note about timing. I left her off the distribution. When my mom asked if Alyssa was still in the loop, I said, She'll be informed when there's something respectful to contribute to. My mom didn't push. She just said, I hope things smooth out by the wedding. They wouldn't. And that was okay. Some relationships don't need to be repaired. They need to be redefined. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into work. Final training rotations, end-of-quarter reports, guest coordination for the ceremony. There was comfort in order. In precision. My fiancé handled the vendors. He fielded calls from the caterer, confirmed timelines with the officiant, triple-checked the seating chart with our point of contact at the chapel. We didn't talk much about my sister. Not because it wasn't there, but because giving it air would only grow it. One night, while reviewing the final RSVP list, he paused and said, Do you want to add her to the ceremony head count? I looked at him for a second. No, he nodded, adjusted the spreadsheet, and moved on. No guilt. No second guessing. The ceremony would be formal. Small. Controlled. Every person in that room had earned their place, either through service, loyalty, or quiet resilience. This wasn't a family event. This was a recognition. My recognition. One night, I went for a run alone. Long stretch of quiet road near the base. No music. Just footfalls and breath. Somewhere around mile 3, it hit me, the difference between forgiveness and permission. I could forgive her. For not understanding. For not seeing me. For needing to tear me down to feel tall. But that didn't mean I had to give her a front row seat to my life. Forgiveness could be silent. It didn't have to come with an invitation. So I kept running. Past the gate, past the hangars, past the point where I used to stop. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running away from anything. I was running toward something. And no one, not even family, had the right to stand in my way. The decision wasn't made out of spite. It was made out of alignment. The original plan, a garden ceremony at a mid-range venue halfway between our hometown and the base, had been chosen for accessibility. Something neutral. Convenient. I told myself it was for the guests, but that was only half true. A garden wedding meant no questions, no salutes, no ranks. Just a ceremony like everyone else's. Quiet. Uncomplicated. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt dishonest. Not in the traditional sense. There were no lies in the plan. But there was an erasure. A pulling back from who I really was and who we were as a couple, just to make it more comfortable for the people who had never made space for me anyway. After that night at Alyssa's, I started thinking differently. Not just about her, but about everyone I'd spent years tiptoeing around. People who had laughed when they should have listened. People who treated my career like a hobby, my authority like a quirk, and my choices like a phase. I had earned my place in the world I built. Every late watch, every field op, every decision that carried real weight. And I had someone beside me who respected it without needing it translated. So I made the change. We moved the ceremony to the Naval Base Chapel. Simple. Sacred. Sealed off from the noise. It wasn't just symbolic, it was secure. Guest access would be strictly vetted. RSVPs needed to be finalized weeks in advance for background checks. No walk-ins. No surprises. When I informed the planning coordinator, she didn't even blink. Makes sense, she said. The chapel has everything you need. And we've got the flag detail confirmed, if you want that. I said yes. We updated the date, filed the revised forms, and restructured the guest list. There was one more shift, though. One I hadn't planned for, not exactly. That month, my promotion came through. Rear Admiral. It was scheduled to be formalized 2 weeks before the wedding, tight timing, but just enough to have the insignia adjusted. When the tailor called to confirm the final fitting, I sent her the new design. White. Custom cut. Regulation compliant. For silver stars embroidered at the shoulder seam. No embellishment. No flair. Just quiet authority. You're not wearing a veil, she asked. No, I said. That's not what this is. We had the invitations reprinted. Simple cards with an RSVP link and a dress code. Formal/service uniform. No address. No map. The location field read, venue access details will be provided upon clearance. Most people didn't blink. They knew the drill. Those who didn't were polite enough to ask. Alyssa wasn't. She didn't receive the invite directly. I'd removed her from the list after the girls' night. But someone forwarded her a screenshot. Probably our cousin. Maybe our mom. A week later, I started getting missed calls. 4 in one afternoon. No voicemail. Just a text, "Hey, why do I need a base pass for this?" I didn't respond. Then a group text popped up, one of those extended family threads that only activates around holidays and drama. "Melissa, is this an error?" Alyssa wrote. "Did you really mean to make people go through military security just to watch you get married? Kind of intense, don't you think?" I muted the thread and went back to work. That night, my mom called. "Alyssa's confused," she said. "She thought the wedding was still at the Botanical Gardens." "It's not." "Well, she's a little upset. She didn't even know about the change. She wasn't invited." There was a pause. I could hear her adjusting her voice, softening it like she was stepping into a negotiation. "I know things have been tense, but they haven't been tense," I said. "They've been clear. She's your sister. She doesn't act like it." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Do you really want to go through with it like this?" "I do," I said. "Very much." My mom sighed. "You know she's telling people you're being dramatic. She's been saying that my entire life. It doesn't make it true." A few days later, my dad texted. "Would it be easier if we picked Alyssa up and drove in together? Might smooth things over." I replied with a single line, "The guest list is locked." Base policy. It wasn't a lie. The guest list was locked. But the policy wasn't the point. The point was that the decision had been made, and I wasn't looking for loopholes. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. When people ask what boundaries look like, they expect dramatic speeches or slammed doors. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's just a checkbox left blank. A call you don't return. A silence you let hold. The week of the wedding, Alyssa posted an Instagram story with a caption that read, "Weddings should be about love, not rank." But hey, some people need a stage. I didn't watch it. Someone else sent me a screenshot. I stared at it for about 5 seconds, then deleted the message. That Friday, I did my final uniform fitting. The tailor adjusted the shoulder seams, stepped back, and nodded. "You carry it well," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I just said thank you. That night, my fiancé and I went over the ceremony timeline one last time. No rehearsal dinner. No speeches. Just a walkthrough with the base coordinator, flag team, and officiant. We kept it clean. Structured. Everything to the minute. I asked if he was nervous. "About the wedding," he said. "Not even a little." I smiled. "About the reaction?" He shrugged. "Let them react." We went to bed early. No drinks. No distractions. I fell asleep thinking about the chapel's acoustics, the echo of boots on marble, the silence just before the command. I didn't dream about her. I didn't need to, because no amount of noise would change what was coming next. And she could mock it all she wanted. But when the room stood for me, she wouldn't be laughing. The morning of the wedding, the sky was clear. Not perfect, just sharp. Cool air, no clouds. You could see every line of the base from the chapel entrance. Every flag, every painted curb. Nothing hidden. I arrived 3 hours early. Not out of nerves, but preparation. The base coordinator met me at the gates, clipboard in hand, hair tight in a bun. She nodded once and walked me through the building. Everything was already moving like clockwork. Honor guard reviewing timing. Security sweeping the chapel perimeter. Seating rows labeled. No music yet, just silence and structure. My dress was waiting in the bridal room, simple white, cut for movement, pressed that morning. The uniform overlay was already laid out, hung carefully above my shoes. The 4 silver stars stitched above the heartline caught the light as I walked past. I didn't get emotional. I didn't have a pre-ceremony cry. Instead, I sat down with my coffee and reviewed the order of service one last time. Then I stood, tied my hair back, and dressed. By the time the doors opened to guests, the chapel was already more full than expected. Most of the seals had arrived early, flanking the aisle in precision formation. Others took seats quietly in uniform rows, nodding at one another, barely speaking. This wasn't their first ceremony. But it was the first one for me. Somewhere in that shuffle, the base vehicles arriving, The final security verifications, my family came in. I didn't see them. I was still in the back, adjusting a button on my sleeve. But I heard about it later. Alyssa had shown up 15 minutes before the ceremony started. Alone. No +1. No excuse. She wore a pale green cocktail dress. Pretty. Short. In any other venue, it would have fit right in. Here, it looked like a costume. Security didn't know who she was. She hadn't submitted her credentials in time, so she had to wait while they verified her ID manually. According to one of the guards, she was annoyed, not rude, but impatient in that way people get when they assume they're above protocol. Eventually, someone recognized the name and waved her through. She walked into the chapel just as the pre-ceremony music began. She looked around, expecting familiar faces, a few sympathetic smiles. But no one knew her. Not really. She found her seat near our parents, middle of the 4th row, and sat without speaking. Our mother adjusted her scarf. Our father was checking his watch. They were guests. No more, no less. The music shifted. The signal was given. And then, the chapel stood. Every man and woman in uniform rose in perfect sync. One voice called out from the back, clear and sharp, "Admiral on deck." The echo followed. Loud. Exact. Immediate. "Admiral on deck." I entered from the side aisle, flanked by the honor guard. No flowers. No veil. Just polished shoes against stone and the silver of my insignia catching the overhead light. I didn't look for her. I didn't scan the rows. I kept my gaze forward. But I could feel it. The stillness. The shift. She wasn't used to being the least important person in the room. And this time, no one laughed. The ceremony was brief. Intentional. Our officiant, a long-retired chief who had served with both of us, spoke clearly and without embellishment. Vows exchanged without theatrics. No audience prompts. No social media moments. Just commitment, spoken plainly. At the end, the honor guard saluted. We turned together. The chapel stood again. No one moved until the command was given. Outside, the air had warmed slightly. Not much. Just enough to feel it on your face. I stepped into the courtyard and finally exhaled. We didn't have a grand reception. Just a secure ballroom on base, reserved for formal events. Low lighting, clean lines. No floral centerpieces. Just service emblems on each table, unit flags at the corners. Dinner was buffet style. Toasts were minimal. The music didn't start until after the cake was cut. And she didn't speak to me. Not once. Alyssa stayed near the bar. Sipped her drink slowly. Didn't mingle much. At one point, I caught her watching me. Not in the way she used to, not with mockery or disbelief. She wasn't looking at the dress. She was watching how people moved around me. How they stood straighter. How they addressed me with eye contact and respect. How I listened. Gave directives. Thanked them by name. She watched it all, and for the first time, I think she saw what I'd been trying to protect. Not the rank itself, but what it meant. The weight behind it. The years. And maybe she saw what she'd never understood, that this wasn't about superiority. It was about service. It was about responsibility. It was about showing up for people when it counted. Not for applause. For duty. And you don't earn that by being loudest in the room. You earn it by being the one they trust when it's quiet. Later, after most of the guests had left and the room had thinned out, I passed her in the hallway near the restrooms. We both paused. For a second, I thought she might say something. A joke. An apology. Anything. She didn't. Just looked me up and down, not critically, but carefully, then said, "I didn't know." I nodded. "I know." And that was it. She turned and walked back into the ballroom. I didn't follow. Because the point had never been to change her. It was to stop waiting for her to catch up. It was 3.5 weeks later when the message came. Midday. I was on base, sorting out post-deployment rotations with my XO when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I didn't check it right away. Too much going on, meetings, a debrief, and early dinner squeezed in between. But that night, when I finally sat down, kicked my boots off, and scrolled through unread notifications, I saw her name. Alyssa. No emojis. No punctuation. Just, I didn't know you were that high up. I guess I never really paid attention. I read it twice. Then once more slower. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't nothing. There was something fragile in the wording, a hesitation. Like she didn't quite know how to write it, or maybe didn't want to write it at all. A gap between guilt and curiosity. For a second, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to respond with silence. Not out of spite, but preservation. I'd finally created distance. Space to breathe. No more bracing for jokes or dodging casual dismissals. Another part of me, the one trained to assess before acting, saw the text for what it was, a pivot. Small, uneven, but deliberate. She wasn't trying to explain herself. She wasn't even asking for forgiveness. She was acknowledging the gap, the one she'd built with her assumptions. I didn't reply that night. I let it sit. The next day, after a long run and a quiet breakfast, I sent back one sentence. Thanks for saying that. No lecture. No bridge offered. Just a reply. Measured. Clear. And that's where we left it for a while. In the weeks that followed, we texted, occasionally. Not often. Not deeply. Birthdays. Photos of our niece. Memes she found online. Surface level. Safe. I kept the boundary without needing to name it. I didn't invite her into the details of my schedule, my work, my plans. I didn't share the travel dates. Or the quiet mornings. Or the inside jokes with my husband that made the harder days easier. But I didn't block her out either. She didn't ask about the ceremony. She never brought up the chapel or the honor guard or the echo of the room when 200 stood in unison. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew she'd missed something she couldn't replicate, not because it was impressive, but because it was real. Earned. She couldn't reverse years of small dismissals with one line of text. And she didn't try. What she did instead, slowly, clumsily, was stop narrating over me. She didn't send sarcastic remarks anymore. Didn't forward jokes about military types or tag me in anything that started with only a real tomboy would. Instead, she started asking neutral questions. How long does your deployment rotation usually last? Is it true you guys can't use your phones overseas? What's the coldest place you've been stationed? They weren't deep questions. But they weren't jokes either. That mattered. I answered sometimes. When I felt like it. I didn't open doors she hadn't earned her way through. But I cracked a window. And through that window, something shifted. Not drastically. Not overnight. But enough. We don't talk about the wedding. Not directly. I think she knows there's nothing to say. But every now and then, I'll get a message when I post something on the base page, a commendation, a ribbon, an official photo in dress whites. She'll send a reaction. Or a thumbs up. Sometimes just a damn. And it's not performative. It's not for show. It's just quiet recognition. I don't need her to understand everything I've done. I don't need her to unpack what it meant to lead people in combat, or make decisions with lives on the line, or earn each bar and star one judgment, one mission, one watch at a time. But I do need, always, respect. And I think she's starting to get that. That you don't have to understand someone's path to respect the way they walk it. We're not close. I don't think we ever really were, not in the way people imagine sisters to be. But we're not hostile. And that's enough. She has her world, the one with PTA meetings and curated Instagram stories and weekend wine tastings. I have mine, rotations, missions, debriefs, a husband who knows what it means to be trusted under pressure. And in the middle, we share a niece who's just old enough now to ask questions like, why do you wear shiny pins? Alyssa told me that one in a voice message. She said your uniform makes her feel safe. I didn't know what to say to that. I just said, tell her that's the point. She didn't respond. But a few days later, she texted me a photo of her daughter in a Halloween costume, a tiny flight suit with plastic pins and a toy radio. No caption. Just the photo. I smiled. And replied, tell her she's got good taste. There's still distance. And that's okay. Rebuilding isn't about rewinding. It's about choosing where and if you want to lay new bricks. I'm not building a new bridge. But I've cleared enough debris that, if she ever walks forward again, she won't trip over what she left behind. It's been 2 years. I'm still active duty. Still commanding. Still married to the man who never needed to be impressed, only informed. He asks about my day, not to make small talk, but because he actually wants to know. I don't filter things down anymore. I say what happened. I say who I led. I say what it cost. And I say it in my own voice, without apology. That wedding wasn't a performance. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It wasn't a stunt or a lesson in optics. It was the cleanest, clearest line I've ever drawn between who I used to be and who I decided to stop hiding. And once you cross that kind of line, you don't walk it back. My sister still texts me sometimes. Holidays, mostly. Birthdays. She'll like a photo now and then, send a one-word reply when I share something about our niece. But she's faded into the background of my life. Not in a cruel way, just naturally. Like something that was always too loud, suddenly losing volume. She doesn't ask to come visit. Doesn't invite me to hers. I don't chase connection that isn't rooted in mutual respect. There was a time I thought I needed her approval. That if I could just explain it right, my career, my choices, my values, maybe she'd get it. Maybe she'd stop treating me like a side note. But I don't feel that way anymore. Because what I've learned, slowly, through silence and through ceremony, is that some people never clap for you until the whole room does. But by the time that happens, you've stopped waiting for their applause. And the truth is, the people who stood for me that day weren't performing. They weren't impressed by the dress or the setting or the stars on my shoulder. They stood because they knew what it took to earn them. Because they'd seen the cost, the missed holidays, the sleepless nights, the weight of responsibility when no one else is watching. And they stood not just for me, but for what I represented. Service. Stability. Quiet strength. That's the kind of recognition that doesn't make headlines. But it holds. I don't tell this story to settle a score. I tell it because too many people, especially women, are still waiting for permission to take up space. Still waiting for the validation that someone else was never going to give them. And here's what I've learned. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to explain your path to people committed to misunderstanding it. You don't have to argue for your worth. Just stand tall. And let the right ones rise for you. They will. Maybe not in your family. Maybe not in your hometown. But they'll find you in conference rooms, in classrooms, in war rooms, and wedding halls. And when they do, you'll know. Because they won't flinch at your strength. They won't mock your ambition. They won't mistake your discipline for distance. They'll see you. Not as intense or difficult or not the white dress type. They'll see you as someone who leads. And when you walk into the room, they won't shrink or smirk. They'll stand. Like those 200 did. Clean. Precise. Not for the uniform. For the woman inside it. That's the moment I carry. Not the silence that came after, but the stillness before it. The respect you don't demand, but command. Earned. Lived. And never, ever owed to people who refused to see it. The world didn't change when I walked down that aisle. But I did. And I haven't looked back since. Thanks for watching. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone who never respected you until everyone else did? Or stood your ground after years of being dismissed? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever had to choose self-respect over keeping the peace, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. You don't need their validation to stand tall.